what's going on? My name is Joe. I practice talking on the internet. As usual, if you enjoy what I have to say in the time that we have right now, patreon.com/Joe Lewis with two O's. And for $5, $7, $10, you can curate the content that we have on this page. And I also like to thank Jane, Marking, Maru, Frackle, Liberation, Valentine, and Michael for their contributions. I've been running into this weird trap lately where people just are not really understanding what I'm saying. So I want to clarify something as far as assets are concerned, because there seems to be this like really weird idea that assets are only just like money in the bank and like what sort of like literal like monetary things. And while it is true that a portion of assets is money, like the cash that you have on hand, assets in America move in a very different way. And this is kind of like the problem, because when you hear people say that, yeah, Black Americans are lacking assets, they just think that it's just money. But wealth and poverty aren't just money. It's a whole bunch of other things. For instance of assets, right? It doesn't matter how hard you work in school. It just doesn't matter. You can be a student that works hard, wakes up every day at 6 a.m. and goes to school at 6:30 and grinds your face off. But it's at the end of the day, meritocracy isn't going to save you with the person who has more assets than you. It's just how it is. It's just kind of how things are constructed and how things are kind of move. And what that looks like is going to be in a lot of different ways. So like if we take a student example, if we take two students, let's say they had the exact same work ethic, the exact same intellectual and practical capacity to understand like the world around them and the materials that are within the courses, right? Whoever has the most assets is going to do better. Because what are assets in the educational system? Assets are resources. They are things that you can access in order to help you and assist you when you're having trouble. Something as simple as having two parents is an asset. Parents are already an asset because they're our first bank. They are our first healthcare. They are our first therapy. They are our first, unironically, our first maids or whatever word that they use for male maids, I guess, like just domestic workers. They function in a lot of different ways. And how much time your parents have to do things with you as a child is going to make you, is going to push you ahead or push you behind. Like, let's say if you are this student that's like equally capable, two students equally capable, and you want to be a soccer player. And okay, neither of your parents are soccer players. And it's like, okay, so I'm not going to be learning this activity through my parents. I'm going to have to learn this activity in other ways. So if your parents have assets, they might enroll you into the PAL League, the PAL League. If your parents have assets, they might get you a private soccer instructor. If your parents have assets, they might get you a private soccer instructor and also enroll you into travel programs and other pay in leagues. If your parents have if you have assets and if your parents have assets, maybe not only is one of your parents a former soccer player, but like an MLS soccer player, maybe your other parent was also a coach. Maybe your dad is also the coach of the very travel team. Like, these are assets that will always lead to potentially better outcomes for an individual who doesn't have those things. And what's unfortunate is when we're looking at like, how do we solve these problems? How do we solve this problem of people with lack of assets? It's gonna lead to some things that are going to upset the meritocracy, individuality brained individuals, because you're going to have a bunch of people who say, I worked super hard to get everything that I needed, but I'm not going to reveal that I had a tutor and went to a private school. Like, I worked super hard to be in this orchestra, but I'm never going to tell anyone I went to a music prep school starting in kindergarten, and then had a private teacher all from when I first started playing to now. It's the same one, and that same person also is the teacher at the university that I'm at. I'll never let people know that part. Like, we have a way of, when we're working hard and getting into the habit of like working very hard, we kind of forget that, yeah, we have certain assets that lead to certain privileges that other people don't have. And just because like I have that privilege doesn't mean that other people shouldn't. And this is going to be true, like, even when we look at it from a political context, right? Like, if we recognize one of the best ways to generate generational wealth for a family is home ownership, we're going to have to really look at home ownership objectively and look at all the disparities and say, like, for a very long time, we gave people who did not deserve homes. And those people who did not deserve homes probably worked hard, probably did what they had to do, but at the starting point, they were never deserving of that home in the first place. And it's like, well, because you hear this sometimes when you listen to old like boomer interviews, like they'll just say things like it's just like the way it will always was, where they'll be like, yeah, like when I got my first home, I was working in a diner, and I was working 5 days a week at the diner, and then I was also in college doing college coursework. And it's like, okay, that's not possible anymore. And if it is possible, you probably have some level of assets. So basically, like, my personal sort of like call to action is recognizing that assets are a thing. Generational wealth is a thing. Different groups of people have different assets, and we're going to have to like get out of our meritocracy mindsets on things and recognize that if we're trying to have people be whole participants in the democratic process, not only politically, but socially and economically, is that we're going to have to do some level of distribution when it comes to the disparity in assets. And you're going to have to like make all those, and you're going to have to just like look at all those meritocracy, rugged individual brain people who will be seething at the mouth when you say, oh yeah, maybe for this group of people by lineage of being excluded from this process as a matter of policy, they probably might just have credit check waivers where they don't get their credit scores checked, and you might have to do some things where you just give them house grants. And like, it's not because they're inferior and they can't like do these things themselves. It's like, hey, yeah, generational poverty is a thing, and generational poverty is going to hold people back from acquiring assets. Because the minute you get, and a lot of people like already deal with this, so it's like you get that big break from your job, you get a raise or whatever, or a stipend for like whatever amount of money, and then you spend that entire stipend paying back bills. And it's like, okay, so much for that stipend. I guess that stipend was just for me to work on getting ahead. And it's like, oh wait, I wasn't even able to pay all my bills with this stipend that I got. I guess I'm back to square one again, and it just reoccurs interest again and stuff like that. It's going to take a lot of resources to solve this problem of generational poverty with people. And we're going to also have to recognize that the federal government and local governments as well, state and otherwise, are kind of responsible in this idea of like, okay, we need to find ways to give people things that don't deserve them. And we did that as a matter of policy for a very long time. because we knew that's the only way for people to be whole participants in America. And now all of a sudden we're seeing like, oh wow, there's consequences of doing it this way, for generations. And there's just groups like Black people, Hispanic people, Asian people who are just behind. And we're gonna have to, as a means of redress, like bring them to a point where they can actually participate in whatever you believe the American dream to be. And all those meritocracy individuals who are just like, I worked so hard for this. And it's like, yeah, what did your parents have when they bought their home? Like, they had no job, but your father's a vet. So you have a home through the VA. Oh, okay. Like, yeah, that's a thing that is an asset. And by virtue of you being in the military, you acquired this asset. And there's some people who were supposed to get that asset that didn't get it. So what are we supposed to do with all those people who it's, if you work hard and do your time, then you'll get rewarded for that. And we even realized that's bullshit. And look, man, like assets are things like your credit score, the credit score of your parents, the occupations that your parents have. It's like the first asset we get, right? Our parents. And anything that your parents have behind them is things that you can eventually leverage as a child and a developing adult to your advantage. Like, by virtue of your parents both being college educated and having six-figure jobs is an asset. Having a home is an asset. So like these things, right? So your parents' credits by virtue of whatever your living situation is, your neighborhood that you find yourself in, the monetary amount that exists in your family's bank account, whatever generational banking and like monetary funds that exist. So like if your great grandfather started up one of the first mines in whatever Western PA, then maybe that's something that you occur generationally. I talked about this a lot not a lot, but a little bit in the walkaway thing, where it's like there are people who don't have to work as hard because they have assets, so they can just utilize the assets that they have, and it just pushes them ahead. And that's not good. They're more than willing to do that. That's their right to do so. But we had to really look at assets that exist with Americans, for example, and just help them. We need to help people. And like, if we want students to have good academics, we're going to probably have to look at the assets that families have, and some families don't have assets and some families do, and we're going to have to give those families that don't have assets so that they can have the ability to participate in the educational process like anybody else. And all of those rich parents are going to have to bite the bullet and shut the fuck up, because what ends up happening is that you get those liberal and conservative parents, and they're a loud group of people. They get very upset when the very idea that their assets are the reason why their children are successful, and not because their children work hard. It's a painful pill for them to swallow. And then even some of the parents with assets who have children that work hard also get mad, because they're like, my child works hard, but don't look at my credit score or anything that I give my child in order for them to be successful. Don't look at that. Just look at them and them only. Do not interrogate me. It's a problem. But anyway, like, to kind of close, assets can be a bunch of different things. They can be the monetary, but it can also be the abstract generational wealth and abstract generational assets that can be a huge advantage when you're dealing with a bunch of people who also work hard. Like, because if everybody works hard, then whoever has the most assets, and these are like the intangibles that exist outside of the work hard apparatus, then those are the individuals who are just going to be ahead. And if we want to get to something that's a bit more like better for people, then we're going to have to recognize that those without assets are going to need assets, or we're just going to keep recreating disparities. And that's not good. As usual, feel free to contribute to the Patreon. Also, I obviously stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Joe Lewis with 2 O's. So that's another place where you can find me do different talks and stuff like that. And that's all I got for you today. Assets are real, and we have to start taking assets seriously. Meritocracy is a myth. Rugged individualism is a myth. If you have assets, you're always going to beat the rugged individualist. You're always going to beat the work harder if you have assets. And a lot of people do have assets. And there's a lot of people who have assets that don't work hard. There's people who have assets that work hard. But the people who have assets that work hard are going to beat the people who don't have assets and work hard. That's just kind of how it is. It's the field of play. That is the field of play. All right, I'm out of here. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.